Good evening. I didn't know I was going to get an introduction. I don't need one tonight. So these guys are who you're here to see. So thank you guys for coming out this evening. We do have information about Ratchet Christie and SES at the tables over by the entrance, so please check those out. So the question before us is not actually first housekeeping. Restrooms are right behind you through the double doors. If you need them, I was asked to announce that. So there you go. In case you need that in our time together tonight. The question before us this evening is a good God logically possible? We're all dealing with the coronavirus and everybody's bumping elbows, and there's constant things we hear about and read about and see that seem to indicate tremendous amounts of evil and suffering in the world. So this type of question is one of the most hotly debated questions, as you likely know, in the realm of philosophy of religion. To discuss this question, we have two respected scholars with us tonight. I want to introduce each one in turn. Dr. James Sturba teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in ethics and political philosophy at the University of Notre Dame. He has published 33 books and over 200 articles. He has been visiting professor of philosophy at the University of Rochester and at the University of Latvia in the then Soviet Union on a Fulbright Award. He has also been visiting distinguished professor of philosophy at the University of San Francisco, the University of California at Irvine, and Santa Clara University. Recently, he received a grant from the John Templeton Foundation to do research and run 2 conferences on bringing the yet untapped resources of ethics to bear on the problem of evil. Please welcome Dr. Sturba. Dr. Brian Huffman holds a BA in History from Lee University, an MA, actually 3 MAs, in Apologetics, Philosophy, and Biblical Studies from Southern Evangelical Seminary, as well as a PhD in Philosophy of Religion from SES. Dr. Huffman currently serves as the director of the PhD program and associate professor of philosophy and theology at SES. He also teaches courses for Apologia Online Academy. He has served in both the Marines and the Navy and is currently a reserve chaplain in the Air Force. His research focuses on defending a classical view of God through traditional moderate realist metaphysics as seen in the works of Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. Please welcome Dr. Huffman. Has been in the works for, I guess, about a year or a little more, maybe, actually, since Dr. Huffman had a debate with Dr. Michael Shermer, and Dr. Sturba reached out to discuss this issue. So I appreciate Devin and Melissa and Ratchet Christie for helping us make this happen. So just real quickly, the format tonight will be 25-minute opening statements from each scholar, 10-minute time of rebuttal for each scholar, and then 5-minute closing statements from each scholar, and then we'll have about half an hour of Q&A. So during the Q&A time, I will be here to call on either the mic in the middle, not the camera here, but back in the middle there. So we ask you to go to the mic, line up, and take your turns. I'll go ahead and say it now, and I'll say it again later. Ask a question. That's what Q&A is for. Don't give a monologue. I will ask you to be quiet if you do. So you have fair warning about that. All right, so with that, let me get settled, and I will start my timer, and we will have Dr. Sturba give his opening statement.
Well, I'm very pleased to be here. Many thanks to all those who in various ways made my visit possible. The question I seek to address is whether or not an all-good, all-powerful God is logically possible given the degree and amount of moral evil that exists in our world. Now, it is widely held by theists and atheists alike that Alvin Plantinga conclusively showed against John Mackey that it may not be within God's power to bring about a world containing moral good, but no moral evil. Plantinga argued this is because to bring about a world containing moral good, God would have to permit persons to act freely. And it may well be that in every possible world where God actually permits persons to act freely, everyone would suffer from the malady that Plantinga labeled trans-world depravity, and so every one of them would act wrongly, at least to some degree. Accepting Plantinga's defense, both theists and atheists alike have been willing to grant that it may be logically impossible for God to create a world with moral agents like ourselves that does not also have at least some moral evil in it. Thus, it is generally agreed that a good God is logically compatible with some moral evil. Yet Plantinga also wanted to extend his defense and show that God is logically compatible with a world that has at least as much moral evil in it as does our world. So Plantinga imagined God creating us and placing us in a situation where we are free, and where the amount of moral evil that exists in the world is simply the result of how we exercise that freedom. Here, Plantinga assumed that God cannot act otherwise without reducing the freedom in the world, and thereby also reducing the moral good that comes from exercising that freedom. Unfortunately, Plantinga's solution to the problem of the degree and amount of moral evil in the world fails to take into account that there are two ways that God can promote freedom in the world. It recognizes that God can promote freedom by not interfering with our free actions. However, it fails to recognize that God can also promote freedom, in fact, promote far greater significant freedom, actually interfering with the freedoms of would-be wrongdoers in order to protect the more important freedoms of would-be victims. Thus, suppose that Nat, a law enforcement officer, is responding to an emergency call in a political state whose laws purport to secure a high level of justice. And she comes upon Matt, who is about to assault Pat, his domestic partner. Here, there's no question that Matt would take steps to stop Matt from carrying out his assault on Pat. She would not be concerned to allow Matt the freedom to carry out the harmful consequences of his act. Rather, she would be concerned to secure Pat's freedom from Matt's assault. The freedom of Matt to carry out his assault would have virtually no weight at all against Pat's freedom not to be assaulted by Matt. Moreover, whenever such assaults occur, they result in a morally unacceptable distribution of freedom. What happens is that the freedom of the assaulters, a freedom that no one should have, is exercised at the expense of the freedom of their victims not to be assaulted, an important freedom that everyone should have. In fact, each time God permits, rather than prevents wrongdoers to inflict significant and especially horrendous evil consequences on their victims, there would be a net loss of significant freedoms, given that the freedoms of victims that are lost are far more important than the freedoms of the wrongdoers that are exercised. So clearly, with respect to a broad range of actual cases in the world, God would have not chosen to secure the significant freedoms of those who are morally entitled to those freedoms by restricting others from exercising freedoms that they are not morally entitled to exercise. As a consequence, significant moral evil has resulted that could otherwise have been prevented. So if God were justified in permitting such moral evils, it has to be on grounds other than freedom, because an assessment of the freedoms that are at stake would require God to act preventively to secure a defensible distribution of freedom, which God, of course, has not done. Thus, having established the need for further argument to show whether or not the existence of an all-good God is at least logically compatible with the degree and amount of moral evil in the world, we now need to determine whether it is logically possible that there could be some good other than freedom that would justify God in permitting rather than preventing the amount of moral evil in our world. Let's narrow the search a bit. Let's focus on whether there would be a justification for God's not preventing, hence permitting, the final stage of significant and especially horrendous evil actions of wrongdoers. The stage where the wrongdoers would be imposing their evil consequences on their victims. Let's assume that there would be a justification, at least in terms of freedom, for God's not interfering with the imaginings, intendings, and even the taking of initial steps by wrongdoers toward bringing about significant and even horrendous evil consequences on the would-be victims. Let's also assume that there would be a justification, at least in terms of freedom, where God's not interfering when the consequences of immoral actions are not significant. So the question is, could there be a greater good justification for God's permitting significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral actions. Here, it's important to see that the goods that could be provided to us are just two types. Either they are goods to which we have a right, or they are goods to which we do not have the right. That captures all the goods that could be provided to us. Turning to goods to which we have a right. Providing us with goods to which we have a right is also a way of preventing evil. More precisely, the provision of such goods by those who can easily do so without violating anyone's rights is a way of preventing the evil of the violation of people's rights. Thus, if I provide someone with food and lodging to which that person has a right, when I alone, other than God, can easily do so without violating anyone's rights, I prevent that person from suffering an evil. Correspondingly, the non-provision of goods to which we have a right is also a way of doing evil. More precisely, the non-provision of such goods by those who can easily provide them without violating anyone's rights would itself be evil. Thus, if I do not provide someone with the food and lodging to which that person has a right, when I alone, other than God, can easily do so, my omission, which is equivalent to a doing here, is also evil. In addition, goods to which we are entitled are either first-order goods that do not logically presuppose the existence of some serious wrongdoing, like the freedom from brutal assault, or second-order goods that do logically presuppose the existence of some serious wrongdoing, like the provision of aid to a victim of brutal assault. Now, for all such first-order goods to which we are entitled, the basic moral requirement that governs their provision is evil prevention requirement 1. Prevent rather than permit the significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral actions, a good to which we have a right, when without violating anyone's rights, that can be easily done. For example, if I can easily prevent a small child from going hungry, or easily prevent your partner, if you can easily prevent a small child from going hungry, or easily prevent your partner from being viciously assaulted without violating anyone's rights, then you should do so. This requirement is an exceptionless minimal component of the Pauline principle, never to do evil that good may come of it, which would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists, as well as theists and atheists alike. This requirement would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists because, as this minimal component of the Pauline principle has been formulated, there are no good consequentialist or non-consequentialist reasons for violating it. Theists and atheists accept this requirement for the same reasons that consequentialists and non-consequentialists accept it. However, theists also believe that God, without violating this requirement, can be justified in permitting significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action in order to prevent greater evil consequences. Atheists would just love to be able to demonstrate that theists are mistaken about this. Turning to first-order goods to which we have a right. Now, with respect to first-order goods to which we have a right, we are sometimes stuck in a situation where we can only provide some people with such a good and hence prevent corresponding evil from being inflicted on them, by not providing other people with another good whose non-provision inflicts a lesser evil on them. For example, we may only be able to save 5 people from being robbed and assaulted who are close by, if we don't try to also save 2 other people from being robbed and assaulted who are farther away. God, however, would never find himself possibly stuck in such situations. God will always have the causal power to prevent both evils. Here it might be objected that for all we know, it would be just logically impossible for God to prevent the evil consequences of both actions in such situations. This seems like something that skeptical theists might want to say. Here the possible goods would be the preventions of the significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action. So the question is, would there be entailment relations between such goods and the remission of the consequences of lesser evil, significant evils that would render it logically impossible for God to prevent both evils? Yet notice how strange such entailment relations would be. Here we are, dealing with situations where we lack the causal power to prevent the evil consequences of both actions. And we appeal to that lack of causal power to justify why we permit the lesser evil consequence to prevent the greater evil consequence. For just such situations, we are imagining that it is logically impossible for God to prevent the consequences of both actions that are just causally impossible for us to prevent. Right off, that would make God impossibly less powerful than ourselves. Thus, we could imagine that we would require new causal powers through technology to prevent both evil consequences in such contexts, while God would still be stuck in a logical impossibility. If that isn't contradictory enough, suppose it were logically impossible for God to prevent the evil consequences of both actions A and B in situations where we cannot causally prevent both consequences. Then, assuming that God did prevent the consequences of action A, that would imply that action B, with its consequences, would be logically necessitated. But for both compatibilists and incompatibilists, an action that is logically necessitated is not a free action, maybe not even an action at all. So it turns out that assuming that it is logically impossible for God to prevent the evil consequences of both A and B leads to two contradictory conclusions. One being that all-powerful God is less powerful than we are. The other being that in contexts where we causally cannot prevent the evil consequences of both actions, God could, and assuming he did prevent the evil consequences of one of them, logically could not prevent the evil consequences of the other. So the assumption must be rejected. It must then be the case that God could always prevent the horrendous evil consequences of both actions in contexts where we, due to our limited causal power, can only prevent the evil consequences of one of them. Accordingly, God would have to prevent both evil consequences in all such cases unless there is a good to which we are not entitled, the provision of which would justify God in permitting the lesser evil consequences in such cases. Turning to second-order goods to which we have a right. With respect to second-order goods to which we have a right, like receiving medical aid after one has been brutally assaulted, it would be wrong not to provide such goods when one can easily do so without violating anyone's rights. However, given that the need we have for such goods depends on the existence of significant moral wrongdoing, it would be preferable for anyone who could easily do so to prevent the consequences of that wrongdoing on which the second-order good depends. This is because the victims of significant moral wrongdoing who have a second-order right to such goods would have morally preferred that anyone who could have easily done so would have kept them from suffering the consequences of the wrongdoing that would ground their right to second-order goods of rectification and compensation. For example, a victim of brutal assault would have morally preferred that anyone who could easily have done so would have prevented the consequences of his assault, who is now having the right to second-order goods resulting from that assault. So we have evil prevention requirement 2. Do not permit, rather than prevent, significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action simply to provide other rational beings with goods they would morally prefer not to have. This requirement, too, is an exceptionalist minimal component of the Pauline principle, which would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists, and it should be acceptable to theists and atheists as well. Again, this requirement would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists because as this minimal component of the Pauline principle has been formulated, there are no good consequentialist or non-consequentialist reasons for violating it. Theists and atheists should also accept this requirement for the same reason that consequentialists and non-consequentialists accept it. In virtue of this requirement, God should have acted so as to respect the moral preferences of those who would now have rights to such second-order goods, and that would have eliminated the need for those goods, but clearly this has not been done. Turning to goods to which we do not have a right. With respect to goods to which we do not have a right, like being provided with the opportunity to provide medical care to someone who's been brutally assaulted, securing such goods for others, even when we could easily do so, is not morally evil. We may simply have good reasons for not providing such goods. In any case, such goods are also either first-order goods that do not logically depend on serious wrongdoing, or second-order goods that do logically depend on the existence of serious wrongdoing. For all such first-order goods to which we do not have a right, the basic requirement that governs the provision of them is Evil Prevention Requirement 3. Do not permit, rather than prevent, the significant and especially the horrendous evil consequences of immoral actions on would-be victims, which would violate their rights, in order to provide them with goods to which they do not have a right, when there are countless unobjectionable ways of providing those goods. This requirement, too, is an exceptionalist minimal component of the Pauline principle, which would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists, as well as theists and atheists alike. Again, this requirement would be acceptable to consequentialists and non-consequentialists, because as this minimal component of the Pauline principle has been formulated, there are no good consequentialist or non-consequentialist reasons for violating it. However, theists also believe that God, without violating this requirement, can be justified in permitting significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral actions in order to provide goods to which they do not have a right. Atheists would just love to be able to demonstrate that theists are mistaken about this. Turning to first-order goods to which we do not have a right, with respect to first-order goods to which we do not have a right, both God and ourselves have numerous ways of providing people with such goods without violating anyone's rights, by permitting rather than preventing the significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action to be inflicted on them. In cases where we humans are causally constrained by lack of resources and are thus unable to provide someone with such a good without permitting the serious violation of the person's rights, God would never be subject to such causal constraints. Now, it might be objected here, for all we know, it would be just logically impossible for God to both provide us with first-order goods to which we do not have a right and prevent horrendous evil consequences of immoral action from being inflicted on us, something to which we do have a right. Again, this seems to be something that skeptical theists might want to say. But as these goods have been specified, they are first-order goods to which we do not have a right. Being first-order goods, their provision does not logically depend on the existence of any previous wrongdoing that God would have to have permitted. Hence, it would be logically possible for God to both provide us with such first-order goods to which we do not have a right, while preventing horrendous evil consequences of immoral action from being inflicted on us, something to which we do have a right. And this undercuts the objection. Therefore, it must be the case that God can both provide us with first-order goods to which we do not have a right, and prevent the significant and especially horrendous evil consequence of immoral action from being inflicted on us, something to which we do have a right. That being the case, there is no grounds at all for making the provision of first-order goods to which we do not have a right conditional on God's not preventing significant and especially horrendous evil consequence of immoral action from being inflicted on us, given that we have a right to that prevention by whomever is in a position to do so without violating anyone's rights. Put another way, the provision of first-order good that is supererogatory or beyond the supererogatory cannot be conditional on God's failing to provide something whose provision is obligatory. Providing supererogatory or beyond goods cannot be legitimately secured by failing to provide goods that are obligatory and thus should be provided. Turning to second-order goods to which we do not have a right. Unlike first-order goods to which we do not have a right, the very possibility of second-order goods to which we do not have a right is conditional on the existence of moral wrongdoing. For example, consider the opportunity to console a rape victim. No one is entitled to be provided with such a good, and its very existence depends upon God's permission of a rape. Given then that the would-be beneficiaries of this good would morally prefer that God had prevented the rape, rather than that they receive this good, God should have acted to respect their moral preferences. Even the perpetrators of such wrongful deeds, who later have the opportunity to repent them and seek forgiveness, would always morally prefer that God had prevented the external consequences of their immoral deeds, So in virtue of evil prevention requirement 2, God should have acted to respect the moral preferences of all those who would be the beneficiaries of second-order goods to which they do not have a right, and not permitted significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action on which such goods depend for their existence. In sum, all the goods that can be provided to us are either goods to which we have a right or goods to which we do not have a right. Each of these types further divides into first-order goods that do not logically depend on moral wrongdoing and second-order goods that do logically depend on moral wrongdoing. In virtue of evil prevention requirement 2, God is required to eliminate the need for second-order goods of either type. With respect to first-order goods, the moral evil prevention requirements 1 and 3 could strain the pursuit of greater good justifications for both God and ourselves. We can also restate my argument to approximate the form that John Mackey should have used to succeed in a famous exchange with Albert Camus as follows. 1. There is an all-good, all-powerful God. This is assumed for the sake of argument by both Mackey and Flanagan. 2. If there's an all-good, all-powerful God, then necessarily he would be adhering to evil prevention requirements 1 through 3. 3. If God were adhering to evil prevention requirements 1 through 3, then necessarily significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action would not be obtained through what would have to be his permission. 4. Significant and especially horrendous evil consequences of immoral action do obtain all around us, which, if God exists, would have to be through his permission. This is assumed by both Mackey and Flanagan. 5. Therefore, it is not the case that there is an all-good, all-powerful God. Let me just end with this postscript. While I've defended atheism in this presentation, I've not always been an atheist. In fact, I was in a religious order for 12 years, leaving only just before I would have had to have taken final vows at age 26. And I only became an atheist recently, after accepting a John Templeton grant to apply the yet untapped resources of ethics and political philosophy to the problem of evil. Work on this Templeton grant ultimately led to my developing argument I just presented to you today. That argument is further set out in my just published book with the same title as the presentation. Moreover, if any one of you, in particular Professor Huffley, is successful in poking a hole in my argument, I would be happy to give up being an atheist. My commitment to atheism is only as strong as the soundness and validity of my argument. Undercut my argument, and poof, at least in my case, no more atheists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sturber. Now we will hear a 25-minute opening statement from Dr. Huffley. Could you repeat that? The whole thing. I'm ready. Well, good evening. I'm so glad you're here. I wanted to thank you for being here. I do commend Jim's book to you. It is a good book. If you're new to philosophy, it's not necessarily the easiest book to read. Even for me, who's been doing this for a little while, and I found myself going back having to reread sections, these different principles. And so hearing it read like that is even harder to follow for me. So if you wouldn't mind going back and have some of that, just kidding. All right, we have all experienced evil. All right, most of us have not experienced it on the level of Job. Allow me to sum up the story of that book. Job is arguably the oldest book in the Bible and is about a man named Job who suffers much. The basic question of the book is, why do the righteous suffer? God basically dared Satan to try and get Job to curse him. Satan said that God was protecting him, and thus there was no way Job would curse him. God told Satan that all that Job had was in his hands, but Satan
His 7 sons and 3 daughters were killed. His many servants were killed. His livestock, which numbered in the thousands, were killed. The text says, in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. God said to Satan that he had incited God against Job without reason. Afterwards, God allowed Satan to directly inflict Job with swords all over his body. Afterwards, Job's friends showed up and mourned with Job silently for a week. Then they wanted to know what had happened. What did you do, they said, to make God do these things? In their minds, there was no way God would allow a righteous person to suffer like this. Job wondered the same thing. How could God allow such things? He wanted to get God into a courtroom to prove that his suffering was wrongful. Who would be the judge? How to reconcile God with such suffering? Today, atheists charge Christians, really theists, with what has become known as the problem of evil. If God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good, how or why would he allow such evil? Typical answers from Christians come in the form of theodicies or defenses. The former attempt to show that God is morally justified in allowing for evil, while the latter attempt to show that his existence with evil is not logically contradictory. The problem of evil has taken various forms. The two general forms are the logical and evidential arguments. The logical argument attempts to prove that God and evil are logically incompatible, while the evidential form says that given the amount of evil, God probably doesn't exist. God for Jim Survey is arguing that there is no logical possibility that God exists due to the amount of horrendous evil in the world. So what exactly does Jim have to do to prove his thesis? First of all the arguments for God's existence have to be assumed or proven to be either invalid or unsound. All of them. Second, he must show that all of the various ways of accounting for God and evil have to be demonstrated to be invalid or unsound. In short, he must maintain that God is morally obligated to prevent horrendous evil, that he has means to do so, and that he is not doing so. Such a position that argues there is no logical way God could exist is a tall order that most atheists would not want to defend. Regarding the first point that Dr. Survey has to prove, that one must necessarily dismiss all of the theistic proofs for God's existence. If there are sound arguments for God's existence, that is, arguments that show God exists, the presence of evil in the world could not negate the existence of a being that has already been proven to exist. Rather than saying that such a being must not exist, if it has been proven to exist, the appropriate question to ask is, how does evil and God fit together? This line of reasoning is what Ryan Davies calls the "we already know God exists" argument, as an answer to the problem of evil. In short, if it can be demonstrated that the universe is contingent and requires a necessary being, God, for its existence, then evil is not even the kind of thing that could be, even in principle, used to negate God's existence. That is because such a being, God, would have been shown to be a necessary being, that is, a being that must necessarily exist. Regarding the second aspect of Dr. Survey's case, namely the question of how evil and God could fit together, there have been various ways theists have attempted to show that God and evil can coexist. Some of these arguments are better than others, and I sympathize with Dr. Survey's critique of some of these, if certain assumptions about God are made. For my part, I merely have to demonstrate that it is at least logically possible for God to exist somehow alongside evil. I don't have to show that God actually exists, although I do believe that. I also don't have to show that Christianity is true, or even could be true, although I also believe that. I merely have to show that there is some logical way that God could exist along evil, is such a thing possible. Well-known atheist philosopher Dale Mackey famously argued that given the logical form of the problem of evil, it could be demonstrated that God does not exist. His argument is as follows: God is omnipotent, God is wholly good, and yet evil exists. There seems to be some contradiction between these three propositions, he says, so that if any two of them were true, the third would be false. Of course, by wholly good, Mackey means morally good. But Mackey claims, quote, once the problem is fully stated, it is clear that it can be solved. in the sense that the problem will not arise if one gives up at least one of the propositions that constitute it. This is precisely what the solution is I am arguing for. Dr. Sturba's argument is much like Mackey's. His thesis is that a good God cannot even logically exist, since there is so much horrendous evil. Such a God would be said to be an omni-God, that is, all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good. In other words, a good God would not, should not, could not allow for such evil. This is because, according to Dr. Sturba, as well as many other atheists and even theists, God has moral obligations in how he treats his creatures, as well as the means by which to fulfill those obligations. This is a position that runs throughout every chapter of Dr. Sturba's book. Without this position, that is that God has moral obligations with the means to achieve them, I believe that Dr. Sturba's argument is unsuccessful. Thus, following Mackey, since God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good, and since evil exists, such a God must not exist. In order to discuss what God would have to do or be, one must have some good idea, decent idea, regarding God's nature as well as the nature of evil. However, if we are going to talk about God existing or not, and whether he has moral obligations, we have to first have a decent idea as to what God is and is not. Thus, the first question in a discussion on God and evil should not be, can God and evil exist? It should be, are there any good reasons for thinking that a God exists? And if so, what would that be like? What would he be like? Secondly, we should ask, what is the nature of evil? And if we have good reasons for thinking God exists, how can evil and God coexist? At this point, we need to address this first question. What is God like? Classical theism, the view that God exists as the cause of the universe, holds that God is the cause of the universe and transcendent, is unchangeable, timeless, spaceless, infinite, and pure perfect existence. According to certain theistic proofs for God's existence, such as the first way of Thomas Aquinas, God is pure being, pure act, wholly simple, that is, he does not have parts, etc. Given that God is pure actuality or pure existence, he cannot change, for God would have no potential to change if he is purely actual with no distinction in his being. If he could not change, he would not be temporal, since time is the measurement of change. He would be perfect and infinite in his being. This kind of being is certainly good. But none of this is to say that God is morally good in the way that humans are. To say that a being is morally good is to say that the being is living and acting the way he should. In other words, he is living up to a standard of morality that has been imposed on him from without. Humans have made such moral obligations since God created us with a moral code, sometimes called a conscience. Humans can either live according to the way we should live or not. I'm arguing that if God exists, there is nothing that imposes any moral obligation on him. He doesn't answer to anyone, and since he is not a human, he does not live up to human laws or standards. Dr. Sturba maintains that a good God can't exist given the horrendous evil in the world. If God is not morally good, can he be good in another way? Like God, humans and all existing things have metaphysical goodness. That is, all things that exist, just by virtue of having existence, have actuality in some level of perfection. Thus, they are metaphysically or philosophically good. But humans can be morally good too. What about God? In this classical sense, goodness and being are nearly convertible, since by goodness was meant something that was desirable according to its perfection and existence. Since God would be perfect being, he would be perfect goodness. But this is not to say that he is morally good, only that he is metaphysically good. But to such a way of using the term good makes sense. I submit that it does. When we say that various things are good, we don't use the term good in the same exact way. For example, when I say that my shoes are good, my car is good, my computer is good, a hamburger is good, a person is good, etc., I don't mean the exact same things by the term good. This is because the nature of the things we are talking about are different. To be good shoes means that they are comfortable and protective. To be a good car means that it is dependable and safe. To be a good computer means that it performs the way that a computer should. A hamburger is good if it tastes good and is nourishing. A good person lives a good way a person should. Thus, the meaning of the word good is not the same for everything we use the term with. those things' natures are different, and the meaning of the word good is determined by what the thing's nature is and how well it measures up to that nature. But we do know something about those things' natures. If the word good can have different meanings for finite things that we experience on a daily basis, how much more can it differ regarding an infinite, eternal, unchanging, immaterial, perfect cause of the universe that we don't experience through sensation? I am maintaining that we simply do not know the nature of such a being. However, I do think we can say that such a being could not be a moral being in the sense that humans are, since the Creator, by definition, is not subordinate to anything. He is the sovereign creator of all finite being. He has no obligations or moral standards to uphold like humans do. As Thomas Aquinas says, since good is perceived by intellect, it is the object of the will. It is impossible for God to will anything but that which His wisdom approves. This is, as it were, His law of justice in accordance with which His will is right and just. Hence, what He does according to His will, He does justly, as we do justly what we do according to law. But whereas law comes to us from some higher power, God is a law unto Himself. End quote. In other words, whereas humans do what is right by living up to the standard God has set, God has no set standard to measure up to. I would argue that moral obligation is a created category like time, matter, and space that applies to limited, finite humans. Thus, to maintain that God is morally obligated is to maintain that He is like a finite creature who is subordinate to something else. What would that something else be? It can't be a created thing, since the Creator is by definition prior to and greater than His creation. But there is no other option other than to agree with Aquinas in saying that any law associated with God is a law that is rooted in God somehow, namely, God is a law unto Himself. So what does it mean to say God is good if He is not morally good? First, we need to ask what goodness is in general. Aquinas, referring to Aristotle, says, quote, hence the philosopher, as Aristotle says, goodness is what all things desire. Now it is clear that a thing is desirable only insofar as it is perfect. For all desire their own perfection, but everything is perfect so far as it is actual. Therefore it is clear that a thing is perfect so far as it exists. For it is existence that makes all things actual. End quote. Thus, according to Aristotle and Aquinas, general goodness is connected with existence. Something can't be good if it doesn't exist. Existence, then, is a necessary condition for goodness. But according to Aristotle and Aquinas, it is also a sufficient condition in that insofar as a thing exists, it has certain perfections and desirables. Accordingly, as Aquinas goes on to say, every being as such is good. Further, God is the supreme good, since He is the supreme being and cause of all things besides Himself. Further, since God is not made up of parts, but is infinite perfection of being in simple, being in goodness, He does not possess being in goodness, He is being in goodness. Here, being and goodness are really the same and are only different in how we think about them. Thus, I believe that it can be shown that not only is God good, He is infinitely, supremely, and perfectly good. But what this means is that He is perfect being or existence. In other words, He does not lack anything. Such a lack in being is what classically has been known as the definition of evil. To be evil is in some way to have a lack or corruption in a thing's being. Rot in an apple is a corruption that should not be there. When the eye is blind, it is said to be lacking something that it should have, in sight. Not having sight is a type of evil. Such are physical evils, but moral evils would also have a corruption in being in one's desires, rule, etc. Thus, since God does not and cannot lack anything that He should have, since He is perfect, infinite existence, He is said to be perfectly and infinitely good. Not only does this show that God is perfectly good, it follows upon the creator-creature distinction that God is not part of the universe as we are. We should not think of God as one of us. He is not merely a greater being. He is not simply more powerful than us, or more knowledgeable than us, or more anything than if all we mean is bigger and greater in a quantitative sense. As the transcendent creator of all finite being, He transcends all of our created categories. To quote R.F. Holland, quote, it makes sense for us to have or fail to have moral reason reasons for our doings and refraining because, as human beings, we are members of a moral community. But God is not a member of a moral community or of any community. To be sure, there are small g gods who have been conceived in that way, like those of the ancient Greeks. Such gods are like fairies. To credit the one true God of having a moral reason for doing anything is to conceive him in the manner of Greek popular religion, as being among beings, instead of the absolute being who is the creator or creator of the world. When God is conceived as a one among many, he becomes subjectable to a moral judgment. And within a moral community, of course, it would make perfectly good sense for the one by whom, or let us say the chief one by whom, we are judged to be submitted to our moral judgments, end quote. However, such a good is usually not what people, even contemporary philosophers of religion, mean when they say God is good. Usually such thinkers as Mackey and Hensberg have in mind is a moral goodness. Let's return to Mackey's argument and possible solution. He argued God is omnipotent, God is wholly good, yet evil exists. There seems to be some contradiction between these three propositions, so that if any two of them were true, the third would be false. Again, by wholly good, Mackey means morally good. But Mackey claims, again, quote, once the problem is fully stated, it is clear that it can be solved, in the sense that the problem will not arise if one gives up at least one of the propositions that constitute it, end quote. As stated earlier, this is exactly what I think needs to happen. We should give up the proposition that God is wholly good in the sense that he is morally good. After all, that is what Mackey meant. In essence, we are giving up one of the propositions that leads to a contradiction. And in Mackey's own words, if we do this, quote, the problem will not arise, end quote. Why will it not arise? Because the typical logical form of the problem of evil, including the one Dr. Sturba is advocating, argues that God has a moral obligation to eliminate or prevent evil, especially horrendous evil. Since we see such evil around us, it is argued, such an omni-God with moral obligations must not exist. However, since we have dropped the idea that God is morally obligated to eliminate or prevent said evil, I argue that the logical entailment, if there was one, no longer follows. Back to the story of Job. Starting in chapter 38 in the book of Job, God begins to answer why he let Job go through what he went through. What does God say? Does he try to reason with Job and say something like, Job, if he only knew what the justifying reasons I had for doing that were, you would understand. Does he plead with Job? Does he reason with Job? Unlike many theists who want to justify God's actions by invoking various theodicies, ways of justifying God in the face of evil, or defenses, ways of showing that his existence and that the evil are both possible, God simply asks Job a series of questions. He begins by saying, quote, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me, end quote. God asks Job questions such as, where were you when I created all of this? The mountains, the oceans, the animals, the stars? Then Job answered, the Lord. I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and make it known to me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself, and repent in dust and ashes. So what's the overall lesson of Job? God let Satan kill Job's family, except his wife, and inflict disease on Job's body. This was said to be done without reason. Job accused God of acting unjustly and wanted to take God into court, but there could be no judge. God responds by rebuking Job's ignorance. What was his ignorance? Pretending to be able to judge God in the way that we judge each other. God can't be judged by us, for as Holland said, God is not a member of our community. We are creatures in his creation. He is not judged by our standards. He is a law unto himself. Conclusion. Allow me to summarize the main points of the speech. Dr. Sturba is maintaining that God has moral obligations to prevent horrendous moral evil from happening. Horrendous evil does happen, therefore, says Sturba, a morally good God can't exist. By way of refutation, I have argued that while God is good, in that he has unlimited existence, actuality, and perfection, he is not morally good in the sense of having obligations. Thus, he is not obligated to prevent horrendous evil. Given that God has no moral obligation to prevent horrendous evil, the fact that horrendous evil exists cannot even in principle be an argument to show that God cannot logically exist. If God can exist alongside horrendous evil, which I am arguing that he can, since he has no moral obligation to prevent it, there is at least a logical possibility that God exists. Even if we take the proposition that my argument doesn't necessarily show that God exists, I think it can be argued that there is at least a logical possibility that God exists in the face of horrendous evil, since God, as I've argued, is under no moral obligation to prevent it. If all we are debating in this logical is the logical possibility of God's existence in the face of evil, I think such possibility exists. Dr. Serba makes the following statement in the conclusion of his book. So what is a theist to do when faced with the argument of this book that the existence of an all-good, all-powerful God is logically incompatible, primarily with exceptionalist minimal components of the very principles he's already stated in his speech? He says, the answer is clear. This argument is obviously new, drawing as it does on previously untapped resources in ethics. So the argument could well have a fatal flaw in it somewhere. What the theist should do then is to find that flaw, if it exists. Such has always been the way of philosophers, whether they happen to be theists or atheists, at least since the time of Socrates. There surely is no better response that theists could make when faced with my argument, end quote. It seems that Dr. Serba is admitting that there is a possibility that his argument, quote, could have a fatal flaw in it somewhere, end quote. However, if there could be a fatal flaw in his argument, then there is a logical possibility that there is a fatal flaw in his argument. And if there is a logical possibility that there is a fatal flaw in his argument, then there is a logical possibility that God exists.
Now we'll have a 10-minute rebuttal from Dr. Serba.
So, if my argument is successful, I really don't have to address other arguments for the existence of God. Because if my argument is successful, I've shown that all good, all powerful God is logically incompatible with the evil in the world. That means that all the other arguments, all they could have established is there's some cause of the universe. Not that there's an all good, all powerful God. I ruled that out given the evil in the world. So I really don't have to deal with all the other arguments because I think the kind of view we wanted to defend was that there was an all good, all powerful God. Not that there was some weakling out there that managed to create but then couldn't do anything, couldn't fix anything in the creation. Nobody wants to believe it. In fact, I argue in the book that the only kind of limited God there could be would be either a God who is very, very weak or very, very immoral. I didn't think anybody would be interested in that kind of limited God. Now, Brian Hufflin wants to hold that God is good in virtue of what he is, that is, being metaphysically good, and not in virtue of what he does, that is, being morally good. Brian also claims that his view can be supported by the following philosophical argument. This is the argument he presents in his work. First premise, if God is the creator of the universe, then he does not have the properties of creation. Second premise, morality is a property of creation. Conclusion, therefore God does not have moral properties, he is not a moral being. To evaluate Brian's argument, let's keep the first premise and substitute for the second, intelligence is a property of creation. Now, Brian does not want to draw the conclusion that God does not have the property of intelligence, that he's not an intelligent being. In fact, elsewhere, Brian affirms that intelligence is an analogous property possessed by both ourselves and God. So the same could hold true for moral goodness. It too could be an analogous property possessed by both ourselves and God. So this eliminates Brian's argument for his view. Let me now show that Brian does not even consistently hold the view. This is because Brian wants to make sense of traditional Judeo-Christian God talk. To do this, Brian from time to time has to revert to allowing that God, like us, can be evaluated as good or bad in terms of what he does. For example, elsewhere, Brian affirms that God can be said to be virtuous in an analogous kind of way. So we have Brian here endorsing being virtuous applied to God, presumably on the basis of his good character and good behavior. Just what he said could not be done. Brian also says we can use positive words for God, such as good and perfect. But when using these words, he says, we have to understand they do not mean the exact same thing when applied to us and God. Traditional philosophers of religion would agree. The terms are used analogously here. But while being used analogously, they still do provide a positive evaluative claim about God's attitudes and actions toward us. Brian also says that God is rich in mercy toward us and that he loves us. These claims can only be maintained if we favorably evaluate God's purported actions toward us. Now, Brian says that God's actions toward us, even his actions that lead to salvation, do not add any good to him. Here, Brian may be confusing what I've elsewhere called God's ethics before creation and God's ethics after creation. Before God creates, he is not under any obligation to anyone, nor would it benefit anyone, even himself, to create one particular world rather than any other. Moreover, provided that the creatures in the world that God creates are better off existing than not existing, no one would be harmed by God's creating that particular world rather than any other. After creation, however, I claim that God would have an obligation to protect and benefit those he did create. That obligation would be grounded in the needs of the creatures actually brought into existence. So it is only after creation that God's options become constrained by what would be for the good of the beings he created. Notice that something like this is true for ourselves with respect to the procreation of our own children. Now, beyond his failure of his argument and his view, and the fact that he does not even consistently maintain the view, another problem with it is that he holds that God could be said to be good in terms of his existence without any claim about the goodness of God's actions. Now, in natural theology, God is identified with existence, even necessary existence. But God's existence is then taught to be one and the same with his activity. So God is also thought of as pure act or pure activity, and hence as being good both in terms of his existence and his activity. But this is a rejection of Brian's view. Nevertheless, on this alternative approach, there is no problem thinking about God as being perfectly good if he alone exists. The challenge as to whether a perfectly good God exists only emerges when we think about ethics after creation, and the way that God, if he exists, could be thought of as good or bad in terms of his relations with those he presumably created. That is what my book is all about. It is also important here to distinguish between equivocal, and analogical uses of predicates. Thus, if I say that an apple is red and a house is red, I'm using the predicate is red univocally. If I say that a person is sweet and a dessert is sweet, I'm using the predicate is sweet equivocally. But if I say that I am healthy and this meal is healthy, I'm using the predicate is healthy analogously. The meal cannot be healthy in the way I can be, because it is not a living thing possessed of health. However, it can causally contribute to health, and that is the sense in which I'm calling it healthy. Here the predicate is healthy belongs intrinsically only to the first analogy. Similarly, according to Aquinas, the predicate exists of substance and accidents is to use the predicate exists analogously. This is because for Aquinas, accidents are understood to exist only by adhering in substances, while substances are not similarly dependent. Here, however, the predicate exists does belong intrinsically to all its analogies. Now, when we apply predicates to God and ourselves, even the predicate metaphysically good, we are speaking analogically. Moreover, Aquinas holds that analogical statements about God purport to be literally true. Even the metaphorical statements made about God, such as the psalmist claims that the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, or statements made by scientists that the atom is like our solar system, claiming that its nucleus is like the sun and its electrons are like the planets orbiting around the sun, also purport to be true. The difference, as I see it, is that for such statements the truth is conveyed through non-literal language. So we see here that there is really no problem making claims affirming God's existence, even his moral goodness, as long as we recognize that such claims are analogical ones, in that they do not differ from the analogical claims we make in science and everyday life. Here, we just need to support such claims with good arguments, if we can. In my book, in my initial presentation, I try to show that such arguments are not really available to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sturman. 10-minute rebuttal from Dr. Ruff.
Well, thank you both for your opening statement and the rebuttal. That was very good. My understanding is I'm supposed to talk about the opening, not what he just said. So I'm not going to. You don't have the opportunity to do that to me, so I don't want to do that too much to you. Although I want to. That's what I'm really interested in talking about. So, how many of you is your first debate? For some man debate? A lot of you, okay. What we're supposed to do in a debate, we make an opening statement, and then whoever we're debating will say 10 points. And what we're supposed to do in a debate, and making a statement and rebutting it, is to address each one of those 10 points. Okay. In this instance, it seems like all of the 10 points are founded on one assertion or belief about God. And I would hold that if that assertion or foundation upon which all those 10 other points are based could be proven to be either false or probably even called into question, then the other arguments would be called into question too. Now, I don't disagree with everything that Jim says in the book. I have certain reservations with things that Plantinga says as well. I don't, for example, necessarily hold the Plantinga's view that God cannot logically create a world where people only do good. I don't see why this is kind of contradiction with that. Why didn't God do it? I don't know. But saying why doesn't God do something and does it exist are two different questions. So in reading through the book, and again, if you're interested in this discussion, I highly commend it to you as a really good book. Of course, I don't agree with everything in it, but the book maintains this notion that there is an obligation that God has from the very intro to the conclusion. That God has an obligation, that he is required to uphold certain principles, like the Pauline principle not to do evil, to get good out of it. And the question is, well, if there is a God, and I agree with Dr. Stewart, his goal isn't to look at all the different theistic proofs and see what do they say, what do they not say. But it seems that if we're going to address the problem of evil, and we're going to say this kind of God is required to do X, Y, and Z, we have to have some idea as to what this kind of God is. Right? Now, in the discussions among theists and atheists, not just Dr. Stewart, but among people, my peers, people I would call brothers in the evangelical faith, typically it's the case that we just take God to be very anthropomorphic, that is very much like human beings, in various ways. At a panel I was on not long ago with a very well-known Christian philosopher, says that God is really just different than us in some ways. Quantitatively, he's just bigger or greater than us, all right? Like a cosmic Superman. So if we're going to ask the question, does God exist, or can God exist, and does evil exist, and what does it look like? We have to ask the question, what do we mean by good? Well, we can't, in an a priori sense, before we look at the question, ask, can these two things go together? In asking the question, we have to say, what do we even mean by this term, God? Now, in the classical sense that I've been arguing for, through Aquinas and the various philosophers after him, God is not anything like us. He We reflect him in some ways, but God is not, as Dr. Server said, univocal with us in terms of being just like us. And our God talk has to be, as he says, analogous. This is what goes back to at least Aquinas, if not before. So when we say things about God, like God, he used the word intelligence. To say that you are intelligent and that God is intelligent, I would argue, a la Aquinas, that we don't mean exactly the same thing as that, right? For us to be intelligent means that we have some kind of passive way of learning, we have some sequential way of thinking and using our faculties. God doesn't learn anything, he doesn't think the way that we do. So all these terms that we use of God, we have to understand that we're using them not only of the infinite creator, but in a way that we don't understand, because, as I mentioned, we don't have what philosophers call quantitative knowledge of God or God of his essence. We don't directly know God. We know each other. We have an idea of what human beings are or moral. So, in every single one of these chapters in the book and in the presentation, Dr. Servo maintains that God has these moral obligations. And he maintains that there's a distinction between before and after creation. And after creation, he has these moral obligations. Whereas before, they weren't there, I guess, because there wasn't a creation to have any obligations too. The question is, apart from asserting that he must have these obligations and have them in the same way as humans do, the question is, where do these obligations come from? Are they just the fact that God creates, and what is it about just the mere fact of creation that makes God analogous to, say, a parent and a child or two people have these various moral obligatory relationships? It seems that needs to have more argumentation to show that God is like us in this way. Because, as I argued in my opening statement, God is not a member of our moral community. But if God's not a member of our moral community, he doesn't have the same obligations that we do. And if he doesn't have these obligations that we do, then it seems that he's not required to do away with all these, to adhere to all these principles and do away with the problem of evil in the way that Dr. Servo has maintained that he has. In saying so, if we can demonstrate that foundation, I don't want to use the word assumption, but that position, that God is a moral being like us, if that's rejected, then I think this answers both Mackey and Dr. Servo in saying that God is not good in the way that we think he should be, if we just mean good like each other that we are here in this room. So God can be infinitely good because he is good in terms of existence. In an analogy, I would say that if you're going to buy a car, you don't want to go buy a car that's all beat up and has missing parts, right? So a good car is what it should be. It's complete. Well, God is perfectly complete in what he is. And so he's good in this way. But to say that he has a moral obligation means that he is in some way subordinate to something somehow in some way. But where does such subordination come from? How can it come from his relationship to the universe if all of the universe depends on him as its creator? There seems to be some kind of transcendency between God and creation such that he falls under that transcendency in order to have this moral obligation. And I submit that this moral obligation just simply is not there in the way that we have it as human beings. And if we can maintain this obligation isn't there, then I think the arguments that we have seen in the opening statement don't carry through. 3 minutes. And at the end of the chapter, the book rather, in the conclusion, Dr. Servo maintains that there is at least a logical possibility that there is some fatal flaw in his argument. And as I said in my opening statement, if there is a logical possibility that there is a fatal flaw in his argument, then there's at least a logical possibility that God exists. And since tonight's debate is about can God, a good God, logically exist, not even does he actually exist, I think that we can at least demonstrate that there is at least a logical possibility for this existence, even since Dr. Servo in his own writings has said that there is a logical possibility that he could be wrong in this thesis. So instead of going through one by one in all these arguments, I'm taking more of a Grim Reaper approach, I guess, and saying that if they all are built upon the foundation of God having some kind of moral obligations to us, if we can pull out that foundation, all these arguments that say that he is required or obligated to, or whatever language you want to use, eliminate horrendous evil, then those arguments would fail to maintain. In coupling that with the admission that there is a logical possibility that his argument could be flawed, I think that we can at least say that God could at least logically exist.
You guys get your questions ready? So I'm sure you have several. We'll have a 5-minute closing statement from Dr. Sherman.
Let me put those arguments back. Those are my 3 moral evil or evil prevention requirements. As you probably have been thinking about them, you realize how minimal they are. They really don't demand very much. But if you don't do them, bad things happen. And now the idea is, in my view, unlike Ryan's view, you can evaluate God in terms of his actions as well as his being. Brian, you cannot evaluate God in terms of his actions. So if God created us and sent us all to hell immediately, still could be an all-good God on Brian's view. Not on my view. The Judeo-Christian tradition has always allowed we evaluate God in terms of action. In fact, what is it to evaluate God in terms of creation? Creation is good, so we say God's good. We see good things happen in the world, and we think, well, God is the creator, so he must be good too. So we're always evaluating God in terms of his action. Brian does it continually when he talks about God being virtuous, God being perfect. He's evaluating God not only in terms of his being, but in terms of his action. I say we have to evaluate God in terms of his action, and those are principles that I say we have to evaluate God by. Those are minimal moral requirements that apply to us, and they apply to God. If God is any way going to be judged good by his actions, he has to be evaluated, he has to be fulfilling those principles. I then demonstrate that he's not, and so that means there's no all-good, all-powerful God. You know, the story of Job kept coming into Ryan's talk, and I was really puzzled by that story. I understand the background to it, that Job didn't, the person writing that book didn't believe in an afterlife. The Jews didn't believe in an afterlife yet. So it was just this life. And then I'm thinking, what if Job knew that God was gambling with the Satan he was going to win a bet with the Satan. And he was going to let the Satan do certain things so he could win a bet with the Satan. How moral was that? And, what about Job's children? The ones God allowed Satan to kill initially? You don't get those back. There's no afterlife. They're gone. He gets another set of children. Is that right? I mean, I was really found there's a kind of basic immorality in the whole story. And again, look, at the very end, what God says is, look to creation. Okay? Look to creation. Creation shows the power of God, and it shows the goodness of God. So don't challenge me. Well, I'm saying yes, look to creation. And look at the fact that after creation, God doesn't do anything to help with these. Well, the miracles. The Bible allows for miracles, but those are things God does. And again, if you're going to evaluate God as good because of the miracles, you're evaluating God in terms of his actions. So Brian just can't have it both ways. Either you evaluate God just simply in terms of his being, which I don't even know how you do that, or you evaluate God in terms of his being and his actions, and then you have to act about his actions toward us or his lack of. What he's doing with respect to us is he must be permitting all this horrendous evil when he could easily stop it for no good justification. How can that possibility of a God like that be good? I claim it can't be. I guess that's it.
You guys are coming under time, so awesome. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Dr. Upton, 5-minute closing statement.
All right. Thank you very much again, Mr. Server. Of course, I would love to have more time to go through what we're trying to say, because in trying to cram together all of this dense philosophy that we're trying to pour out into you, because you probably haven't been affected by it before. What we're trying to say, I think what I'm trying to say in demonstrating that God is not, as Jim says, evaluated by his actions, and in saying that God is virtuous or doing miracles, I'm not saying that God is virtuous in the same way that we are, or being evaluated in the same way that we are. We say things like God is not evaluated in terms of his actions, but we also say things like God is virtuous, that God is just, merciful, or whatever. There's at least two ways we can take this. One is to say that God has some moral obligation that he is under, that he is subjected to, that he's being just to you, or whatever. Or the other way, the way I think Aquinas is meaning it, and pulls on a distinction he makes between absolute and suppositional necessity, is that God is willing to do certain things that in our view would be analogous to what we do that seems just. So in willing to create, God doesn't have to create anything. He's not under any kind of absolute necessity where he has to create. But supposing he creates, and supposing he's an eternal being, he creates from eternity, he creates supposition necessary, meaning that if he chooses to do it, he can't undo it. And what he ever chooses to create is created because he creates it that particular way. And we can say that God is loving, just, holy, righteous, even good, but we don't mean it to mean that God is acting justly because he is reflecting some standard that he is subservient to or subordinate to. Rather, what we're saying in the traditional sense of classicism is that God, from all eternity, has willed to create things, and he's willed to do things. He's willed to have a covenant with Israel. He's willed to have a church, to do things through Jesus and so forth. And in so doing, he has fulfilled the plan he set out. That he says that I'm going to create, these things are going to happen, and as it looks like for you guys, this person does justly here, I'm going to do to you guys. And you're going to think you're going to call it justice. But not just because I have to do it. It's just because I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to give to you what I have willed you to be. The God in creating human beings also has to will to give us what it is to be human beings. He doesn't just create human beings and then leave us alone. He creates us and he provides for us. He does things for us justly. And when the Bible talks about him being just or righteous, oftentimes it has to do with his relationship with Israel or the church. It's not that he has to be subservient to some notion of justice, but that in willing to create, he has willed to act in certain ways that to us we can call analogous because we see it in our own experience to be just, to be righteous, and so forth. But there's nothing he is subservient to that would make him have to do this. It's a choice that he, as the creator of the universe, makes to do by virtue of willing to create what he has willed to create. So we say that God is just in certain ways. He certainly is not just in the way that we are, because we're just by living up to our standard of what it means to be a human being. God is just, analogously, because in creating us, we say that God, as the exemplar cause of all that exists, all the goodness that we have as humans, in a sense, pre-exists in him. So the sense in which he is just and merciful of all these things, because as in creating us, all the goodness that we have in us in terms of justice are reflections of his goodness in a sense, but not in exactly the same sense that he exists. 1 minute. All right. Did you get that? All right. I'm trying to pour all this out and it's not going to happen. It's hard to do this in a debate in a different class. All this to say, keep reading. I appreciate you being here, Dr. Silver, for coming all the way in. I really appreciate you filming your book. It was very good reading, very interesting. In my closing, I want to say, keep it up. Read his book. Go buy it. Read Brian Davies' Intro to Philosophy of Religion. Thanks for being here. And just as two professors who love this topic, and students, for your most students, just keep your studies up. If you're a theist, read atheist. If you're an atheist, read theist. And look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's thank our debaters one more time, please. Alrighty, we're going to have about half an hour of Okay, so ask a question, pointed question, you can direct it to either scholar, and we'll give the other scholar a minute or so to respond if they want to add anything. So please come to the mic, and as Frank Turek says, nobody likes to ask the first question, so we'll move right on to the second question. So whoever would like to start.
Dr. Trevor, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, Dr. Halfling. I have an interesting question. So, a lot of your presuppositions I'm very curious about. A lot of them tend to imply an objective morality in order to imply the conditions for evil. So, could you explain where you get your objectivity in order to make those assertions?
Yes, I do. I do assume objective morality, but I actually have arguments. I was a moral and political philosopher for about 25 years, 30 years, and I worked out a theory about objective moral requirements. And basically, the most fundamental moral requirement is to treat relevant interests, the interests of the relevant, fairly. That's the basic moral requirement. I think I look at morality as analogous to something like geometry. Geometry has ultimate axioms, and then you draw conclusions. In morality, you have some ultimate axioms. One of the most ultimate. Well, Aquinas had do good and avoid evil. But you could logically treat relevant interests fairly is one of the most basic moral requirements, and you can get everything from that. Now, just see what people want to say sometimes that, well, morality comes from God. Okay. Well, let's think about this. Suppose our human nature changed so that if you took a knife and put it into my chest, I died and sprang back to life with tremendous pleasure. Now, if that was the way all of us were, we'd have a new moral requirement. Put knives in people's chests as often as possible in order to bring this great result about. Now, did we consult any law of God to know that? No. We just knew it because of what's good for individuals and a changing set of our natural dispositions, and then we concluded what was morally right. So there's a real possibility, I think I've tried to argue pretty convincingly, for an object of morality that has nothing to do with God's will. Oh, look, if God is the creator of everything, then yes, or if there's just a natural cause, that initial cause that brings sentient beings and intelligent beings into existence, and then we can have mathematics, and then we can have morality. Yes, that cause caused that everything. Something has to cause us. But the objectivity of mathematics and morality is something we can demonstrate by its ultimate premises and deriving conclusions from that.
Dr. Humphrey, would you like to respond?
Sure. Yeah, there are ways in which that I agree with Dr. Serba on this. I'm not a divine command theorist either. I don't think that when we say that God is the source of morality, that what I would hold to would be more of a natural law theory. So I would agree that it's not mere claims of fiat that makes an obligation that he gives to us through his command a moral one. So he says human nature could change, and that would change what the moral requirement would be. This is why I would, in my closing statement, I said that when God wills to create, I can't see over there, when God wills to create, he has willed to create humans in such a way, and has instilled what natural law theorists call conscience, or what people call a conscience, in us to say that it is right to treat humans a certain way because of their nature. Now, of course, if the nature changed, then the moral foundation for that behavior would change as well. But given that God doesn't do that, then the morality that we have among us has been created by God, not because it's flowing out of him like we're kind of in some kind of attached to it some way, but that God has created us as human beings with a human nature, such that promoting human nature is a good thing, the good of human nature, and prohibiting it is bad.
Yes, sir.
Question for Dr. Huffman. So if the God of the Bible is real, and God can do anything he wants to, and he knows everything, including what future outcomes will be. Therefore, God knew the fall would happen if he allowed the serpent into the garden. He placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in its top X. Therefore, God wanted the fall to happen, And he knew he would be creating untold numbers of humans whom he would send to eternal torture. He knew all of this, and he decided to create us in the world in this way anyway. How could this God possibly be good?
Okay. So it seems like the way that you're taking good means some kind of a moral good analogous to us, which I'm also rejecting. So there's two questions we can ask here. What is God like and why does he do things? What are his motivations and reasonings? And then, does God exist? Well, I think we can give good theistic proofs, although we're not really doing that tonight in this debate, for God's existence. I think that's been done, that we can show the universe is contingent and requires a necessary being to account for its existence. Now, saying, why did God do what he did? We would have to have, the bottom line answer, we would have to have some kind of direct knowledge into God's intellect or mind to say this is why God did it. We don't have that. So we can't say, this is exactly why God did this, knowing this would happen. It was, the theological answer really is because he willed it to be that way. And everything that happens is because God willed it to be that way. But again, I think your question is assuming that how can God be morally good in this way? I'm not saying he's morally good this way. I'm saying that God as a being isn't judged by us. But the question is, do we have good reason for thinking God exists? And I think yes. And secondly, the question would be then, well, how does this relate to evil? And your question, why would God do this? Apart from trying to give God willed it answers and God brought Jesus and he just wanted to, we don't have access to these motivational questions. But I don't think they disprove the Bible. Saying that we don't know why God doesn't say he didn't do it.
Gerbo, would you like to respond?
Yes. I think the issue is, I'd like to go back to this ethics before creation, ethics after. Before creation, God didn't have to create. He didn't have to create any particular kinds of beings. But once he creates some beings, and those beings have a nature, and some things are good for them, and some things are not good for them, then God, first of all, the creation is an action, and now the question is, all right, there's something valuable being created here, but there's a further question about how will God relate to that thing he brought into existence. Again, it's like parents bringing children into existence. You bring the children into existence, and you leave them in the doctor's office? No, that's not what you do. You begin to take care of them, and this is what it is. This is the obligation that came. Before you produced the children who got pregnant, you didn't have to get pregnant. You didn't have to get pregnant now, or it was supposed to later. But you got pregnant, and the child was born, and now you've got obligations to it. This is what we think about humans. Now, are we going to think about God differently? He can bring things into the world and then has no moral requirements to do anything for you. Doesn't have to observe those three principles. What kind of a God could that be? Not a good God as we understand goodness in this life. And not even analogously could we think that, oh no, he's good in some way. He's got to meet some standards of action. We meet standards of action, he's got to meet standards of action, otherwise he's not a good being.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was trying to decide what question to ask. I would like Dr. Serba to ask you to clarify, okay. At one point you said that God being morally good, you admitted that that is an analogical statement. But it seems to me that if that is analogical, then God is not morally good the same way that we describe people as morally good. And God's moral obligations or responsibility would also not be exactly the same way that we see it or describe it with other humans. So I suppose, could you just clarify that piece?
Okay, I hope it's true that I'm morally good. And I think it's also true that a little fictitious here, my 7-year-old granddaughter is morally good. Now, I claim that's an analogous claim. She's not morally good the way I'm morally good. We understand that perfectly well. That's the same thing. And all these claims we make about God, all the positive claims, are analogous. We make the same kind of claims about humans, but it's by analogy. I even gave a scientific claim about the solar system that's an analogy, that made by analogy. We make these analogous claims all the time. They have truth to them. Only problem I see is when we start to try to make them of God, we see they don't work because God isn't good. He's not abiding by those action requirements, and even our greatest villains sometimes abided by them. God never abides by them. That is problematic.
Yeah, I agree that our language is analogous. I'm not sure what the definition of analogy is. Not just even those who hold to analogy debate what that means. There's different views of analogy all across the board, even among different Thomists, like I'm your mind, for example. To say though that your 7-year-old granddaughter is analogously moral to the way that we are, I don't think that analogy is a self-analogous to us and God, because we're still the same beings. Our granddaughters or children are the same kind of being that we are. They're physical, limited, finite. They're exactly the same kind of being we are, humans. But we're talking about a being that's not even part of the finite created order. We're talking about a being that is infinite and is simply not like us. And to say that X is good requires us to have some knowledge of what X is. And if it's interesting, look at what we think about God in terms of the metaphysical nature. We say God is eternal, immutable, impassible, so forth. These really are negative terms. It's like he's not temporal, he's not material, he's not spatial, he's not changing, infinite, he's not finite. We don't have any direct knowledge of what exactly God is because we're finite beings and we just can't understand infinite being. But if that's the case, it's hard for us to say what God should be like.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Dr. Scherr, would you address the last part of Dr. Huffling's opening statement when he said, is it possible that there's a flaw in your argument, as he stated? If it is even possible that there's a flaw in your argument, it would follow that it isn't logically impossible that a good God exists. If it were not logically possible for a good God to exist, then there could not possibly be a flaw in your argument, and therefore there's nothing that would be able to change your mind, as you stated at the end of your first statement. This seems to be inconsistent with the last statement you made in your opening statement that you would change your mind, and also in the part that Dr. Huffling mentioned in your book.
Yeah, I've been puzzling about that as when it first came out. Look, my argument starts off with a logically necessary claim about God. And then it develops what are the implications of that logical claim. And then it has one empirical premise. That is that God, if he exists, would be permitting the horrendous evil consequences of immoral actions, which we see all around us. That's the empirical premise. Now, I don't think we're going to say the empirical premise is wrong. Is there something about the logic of the logic that God, by definition, it would only permit horrendous evils if there were some greater good that he would be achieving thereby, or some greater evil that he would be preventing thereby? I think that's a logical claim too. I can't see anything why that is not definitional about God. After that, I'm just drawing out the implications of that logical claim. I don't see any way that the thing doesn't work. I then look, if I have a proof in geometry, and I think I've got work set it all out, and then the geometry, I say, well, all right, see if there's a defect in it. I don't see any defect in it. Am I admitting that God is logic? In my case, am I alleging it's possible that God is not logically good? I don't. I don't think I'm admitting that it's logically possible. I'm just saying I don't see how it's logically possible. It may be logically possible. Maybe. Show me. Show me where there's an effect. The other thing is, particularly with respect to Brian's view here, is that, look, he wants to maintain that God is metaphysically good. We are metaphysically good too. He allows that that's an analogical claim for both. Yet, for God's actions and our actions, he denies that there's analogical claims. That doesn't make sense. Either there's analogical claims about God's existence, God's metaphysically good, and we're metaphysically good, and there's analogical claims about God's existence and God's actions and our actions. You've got to have analogical claims in both domains. You just can't have them on one side and not the other. I was actually sneaking in a reply to something else, but I wanted to say that.
I think it's a good question. I mean, if the point is to show that God logically can exist, I think it's fair for him to admit that there's a logical possibility, there's a flaw in his thinking. I mean, I think that's academically, that's the honorable thing to do. Unless it's shown that there's something tightened up somewhere that there can't be any logical, the argument that there is possibly logical. Now, regarding the analogy, I'm not denying there's an analogy with God's actions. I'm not sure what exactly he's trying to say there in terms of saying that I'm not allowing for an analogy. I mean, allowing for the analogy, God does certain things, even the actions themselves are analogies. And even saying that God acts in the way that we act are analogies. Everything that we refer to God in terms of his being and our existence, for example, that we exist and God exists, both metaphysically good, but radically different. We exist, and this would take a whole class to even touch the surface, or book, or lifetime. But our being is participated in, namely that God is giving us being, God is being. The kind of being that Aquinas, for example, allows for God to be, or argues that God is, and that we are. While we both are metaphysically good, we are radically different in that God is ultimately necessary, infinite being, and we're contingent, finite being. And there is this analogy with our actions. All my point is that the analogy doesn't rise to the level of moral obligation.
Thank you.
Hi. So, first I just want to say that I appreciate how both of you mentioned Pelagius's free will defense. And Dr. Sperger, I just wanted to ask you about some terms you made in your opening statement. So you mentioned several times that the example of I think it was a pregnant woman acting in the best interest of her child. How there's typically an obligation on the part of the creator to do what is to the advantage of the creation. But I don't know if this is not understanding, but I guess I don't really understand how that is a necessary trait of a creator to act in the best interest of its creator, or of its creation. So I guess I just wanted to ask a clarification on that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think the idea is this: if you're going to be evaluating God in terms of his existence and in terms of his action, and I don't see how you don't evaluate God in those two ways, analogical, the way we evaluate people in terms of their existence, their character, and their actions. So we're going to, and the question then is, well, you say, is it necessary? Well, look, a parent could leave the child in the doctor's office, or the baby in the doctor's office. There's no necessity that they do what they not are obligated to do. They could be immoral and just walk out. Well, it'll be a little difficult walking out. But whatever, they could just abandon the child. So there's no necessity that they do what morally they should do. And in some sense, but then what happens is they become immoral beings. The mother, father becomes an immoral being here. God would be in the same situation. God could create us and send us all to hell. But then we would know, I think, that God is not a moral good being. He's not good in terms of his actions. Whatever we say about his being, and I don't know how you evaluate actual being as opposed to actions, I think they go together. We would have to say, well then, why did we end up with a very bad creator? He created us, and then 2 days later he sent us all to hell. That was, and now we are stuck in hell. This is really, we got a bad deal. But then we say, well, he was a bad creator. And they would be right.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying not to do that. My position is that when God again wills to create, and supposing he creates, but there's no necessity to create, he wills to create the universe in such a way. And he's created us with certain goods to attain and certain evils to avoid. And he has created it to fulfill his plan. So in creating it that way and being just, God gives us what we deserve. Not because this is where we're different, I think, not because he's under some obligation, but because he wills to create us in such a way that he gives us what we deserve in a sense. And he's set up our lives that if we go after God, that if we seek after him, we live with him forever, and if we don't, or we reject him, we can go to hell. So I'm not suggesting that God can just create us and do it whatever he wants to with us, because I'm saying that in willing to create us, he wills us to live in a certain way, and to call him just means that he provides for us and gives us what we deserve in a sense, based on what we are kind of into our what we're going after willfully. So I'm not saying that God could do that. There are views of God, I think in Islam that will be the case, where God can do whatever he wants and that will be good. Calling God a just God means that in willing us, he has willed certain goods to follow by his very act of willingness to be willful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sturba, you mentioned Job's story of God gambling with the accuser, with the idea of it being immoral if you're Job. That's a pretty immoral act. Job's children dying, that seems to be immoral. Yet all of this is from Job's point of view. And so that brings me to the problem of Job's point of view. If I were to say to you that I had taken one of my children, handed them to a stranger, who then, pierced my child, stabbed my child with metal, ripped part of their body from them, and then gave them back to me, you would go, man, that could be immoral. But my 3-year-old was stricken with one of the worst cancers that children can have. So we took her to the doctor. They stuck her with a steel needle. She was put to sleep. They cut her open. They removed the tumor. They did things that were painful and harmful in the moment to her. There's not a moment when, at this point, she sees anyone with scrubs and she screams. She doesn't think it's moral or good that we would do that, but it's for a good that she doesn't understand. At 3 years old, she has no idea why this pain is coming. And so I think your argument is a great argument to prove to me that God is not good in the way that you think God ought to be good, or a human ought to think God ought to be good. But it feels like if I'm going to use your argument to throw out God, then I've left out the third leg, which is God's omniscience. And we've talked similar, you've answered some questions that have dealt with God's knowledge. But if all these things go on with my daughter, she doesn't understand the greater good. And if we don't understand the greater good that is being worked, then is it not possible that perhaps all that has been revealed by your argument is that we don't fully understand God, or we don't fully understand God's actions because he's omniscient and we aren't. And if we did fully understand God, well, then he wouldn't be much of a God. And so perhaps what I feel like you've argued tonight is that you have revealed that we don't always agree with God, but in light of all the other arguments, that seems like a weak argument to dismiss God, simply because this argument only leads me to say that all the other arguments say he exists, and this one tells me that I disagree with him. So my question is, how does your argument truly respond to God's omniscience? And in the light of all other arguments, is it not presumptuous to say that this argument can be used as an eliminator of the existence of God, or that this particular argument can be the foundation for atheism for a person or any other persons that adhere to your argument? Have you not just proven that you disagree with God?
That's very good. Here's my reply. There's more to setting out the argument. And really, I think what you're driving at, and this is where a lot of theists go, is, well, look, God could give us this great afterlife. Great afterlife. Well, he actually just can't just give it to us, because it's supposed to be friendship with God. And you just can't force somebody to be your friend. So what he can do is give us the opportunity to be friends with him. That's the biggest good that God can give us. The opportunity to be friends with him. That's what the whole afterlife thing is about. This is a great good. Now, what I show is that opportunity to be friends with him, God can give it to us. And it doesn't logically depend on his permitting horrendous evils, lead to suffer horrendous evils, or anybody to suffer horrendous evils, in order to give us this opportunity. They are logically unconnected. So, a good God, a God that would be evaluated in terms of action, would give us this opportunity. Because, look, Ryan says, he creates us and we deserve something. I think we deserve to have those principles followed by this person that created us. I think that's what we deserve. But we also, if there's going to be this afterlife, we deserve to have this opportunity to be friends with him. And I showed he could provide every one of us that opportunity to be friends with him without permitting horrendous evil suffering to be inflicted on him. Again, look at Adam and Eve. They got an opportunity to really be friends with God. They didn't have to first suffer horrendous evil in order to get this opportunity. God just offered it to them, and they rejected it. Apparently, the story from Revelations, the fallen angels, they didn't have to suffer some horrendous evil, and then God offered, do you want to be really alive to me? No, they just rejected God, and the good ones fought it out with the bad ones, and the bad ones got thrown down. No necessity to suffer horrendous evil in order to have the opportunity to be friends with God. A good God would not make us suffer horrendous evil when that is not necessary to give us this great opportunity, this great good opportunity to be friends with him, and he could do it without suffering.
Well, first, I'm sorry with your daughter, and I pray that God will bring healing to her through the medical. I'm sorry?
She's doing perfect now.
Oh, great. Very glad to hear it. I picked Job for a reason because I think it's a good biblical illustration to show my philosophical point. And if you replace God and Satan in the book of Job with human beings, and say, well, I dare you to mess up this guy over here, and then you kill his family and then infect him with some kind of disease, they would, I think, be seen to be immoral. And that's what Job wants to maintain, is that I did not do anything to deserve this. His friend says, what did you do to deserve this? God didn't do as people who were righteous. God doesn't try to give him any kind of justification. He says, like, I'm God and you're not. He doesn't. You expect this answer, but we don't get it. So why does he do this? We don't know. It's his will. We just don't know the divine mind and what God does. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that we don't understand him. There are lots of responses that I haven't given to this problem. I was trying to make this one point. Is that we don't see the whole picture. And as C.S. Lewis says, maybe gotten it from someone else, I'm not sure, but God uses pain to draw us to him. That he does use evil to draw us to him. I think the Bible teaches this. I think it's a fairly strong philosophical point as well.
Thank you. We're going to cut the line off with these last 5 here. So let's make them as quick as we can so we don't keep people longer than we need to.
Hey, Dr. Suba, this question is for you. You mentioned multiple times that we should judge God according to his character. And so I at least wanted to appeal the idea that although I do agree that evil and suffering does exist, I don't believe it is God's fault in the sense that he is morally responsible for the evil. I think that is a product of you and I's fallen nature. Whether or not you agree that we are evil and deserving of death and separation from God, whole other argument, but I at least want to appeal on the idea that when evil and corruption was prevalent on the earth in the days of Noah, God said, I'm going to flood the earth. I'm going to limit it to 125 years. That's their time to repent and trust in me. He extended the opportunity of salvation. And Moses preaches that, or not Moses, Noah faithfully preaches that for hundreds of years. They won't agree. God floods the earth, ridding evil. Or we can go another step. The Canaanites living in the promised land were practicing things like societal gang rape on temple prostitutes, child sacrifice, and other horrendous things. And God uses Israel as an agent and extension of his justice against that evil. Even though Israel is not deserving of God's mercy, neither the Canaanites, nobody is. And the fact that God has the right to extend that mercy to some, I think a good analogy would be, there was a time when Bill Gates walked into a mall and gave 10 people $1 million. But that does not give you and I the moral, or the right to obligate him to give everybody $1 million. And so, I think you know God exists. I think you're angry with how he decides to run his justice because there is a day.
What's your question?
I just wanted to at least appeal, do these actions at least give God any credibility in your defense of being good and enacting judgment on evil? Thanks.
Look, I want to say human beings are really responsible for a lot of the evil of the world. But God is in a position to prevent horrendous evil consequences. And he doesn't do it. So God is doing something that's also problematic. We are doing the evil, we're starting it off, and we should be blamed for it. And that's so, I don't want to say that God's doing all the evil. We are doing it, and God, like one of my analogies that I use in the book over 125 times, is the analogy of an ideally just and powerful state, and what he would do. An ideally just and powerful state would, if you had an ideally just power, people would try to murder, and it would be frustrated at the last instant. There would be no completed rapes. They would be frustrated. That's what an ideally just and powerful state would do, and we would applaud it if it was ideally just and powerful. We didn't say, oh, let the murderer get rid of it, let him kill somebody. No. The murderers, have the murder stop. Have the rapist stop. We would want to be in such a world. Well, if there were an all-good, all-powerful God, we could be. And we're not. So that suggests, or would suggest, there's not an all-good and all-powerful God.
Can we respond? Thank you. Appreciate you.
So I know you mentioned before about how, so I guess my main question is, parents often punish their children when they do something wrong. I understand that we as human beings are doing the evil, but what I guess I don't understand is how we can then say, because God didn't stop us from doing the evil, then therefore he's not good. Because maybe we don't know exactly maybe the evil that we are doing is having the good effects that the good God wants us to have. So I guess my question would be what the response to something like that would be.
Look, I don't want God to step in, nor would I want the just and political state to step in and prevent all evil. I'm talking about significant and especially horrendous evil. So suppose there's, parents want their children to learn, and so there's a bigger boy, and your child is being kind of roughed up by this boy, and the parent is there, or sees it, could stop it, and decides not. Because let's see how maybe the child can figure this out and make something good out of this. And that's fine. But if the other bigger boy is pulling out a knife or a gun and ready to shoot your child, that's when the parent intervenes. And so it's the horrendous evil that I'm saying that's where intervention should happen. The parent analogy is often used to say, all parents permit their children to suffer evil. Yes, but they don't permit their children to suffer horrendous evil for no good purpose, which they could easily stop. No one stands there and watches their child being raped. Say, oh, he or she will come out of this and it'll be better. Oh, I don't think so. We step in and stop. God should be doing it.
That's not real good.
I just think that, again, going back to my whole thing, is that makes God subservient to some moral obligation. Not that he's not after our goodness and not trying to be a just God, but that he's not doing it the way that we think he should, doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm sorry. I'm being told for time constraints we have to cut it off. So I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask Devin.